Okay, this is our last video for the week. This is a new lesson, but based on the same ideas as the last couple. Here we're going to be talking about calculating tips. Sometimes we forget maybe that tipping is an important part of our culture. And so here where it says, what are some services that you tip for? Oftentimes when I think about tipping, obviously I think about when we are eating at a restaurant. Okay, so sometimes we eat at a restaurant, we need to tip. Sometimes if you're taking a cab, okay, you should tip. I know it's a little different with Uber now, but still when you're taking a taxi, you should be tipping your driver. Food delivery. Okay, food delivery is a big one. Make sure you're tipping the delivery person. Services that you receive at a hotel. So that might be like housekeeping. Okay, we like to tip housekeeping. Maybe somebody helped you carry your luggage. Okay, things like that. So typically we're tipping when somebody has provided a service to us, and the purpose of tipping, or the reason it became a thing, was to encourage good service. So if you receive good service, then you would reward them with a tip, and that would mean hopefully that in our society customer service would be a big deal. So when we say why is it important to tip, one thing is it encourages good service. Okay, another reason it is important is because people who work for tips, especially servers at a restaurant or a bar, people who work for tips, they work for less than minimum wage. Okay, so they often depend on tips to be able to survive. And oftentimes at a restaurant as well, your server will have to pay what's called a tip out. So even if you do not tip them, they will still have to tip everyone else that helped them with the service, whether or not you tip them, based on how much your bill is. So if, let's say, you went to a restaurant and you spent $100 on a bill, even if you left them no tip at all, that server would then be required to give a few dollars to the people in the kitchen, or the hosts that helped seat you, or those people that help bus your table and whatnot. So important to remember to tip, otherwise your server is actually spending money to be able to serve you. So in Canada, we typically it's customary to tip about 15%, okay? That depends on the service. If you have great service, it's not uncommon to tip a little more than that, whatever you can afford. But you always want to make sure you're including a tip when you're budgeting whether or not you can afford to go out. Okay, so you shouldn't be going out to eat at a restaurant if you can't afford to tip the server. That's part of the dining out experience. So in order to figure out another word for a tip is gratuity. So in order to determine the tip or the gratuity, we're going to convert the percent to a decimal like we did before. So we're going to use 15% or 20% sometimes. We're going to convert it to a decimal first. Then we're going to multiply the bill amount before tax. So before we charge the tax on, we're going to look at that original cost, or that subtotal. You'll often see it called subtotal. Okay, we're going to multiply that subtotal by the decimal to determine the tip amount. Okay, and then that last step, which really should be here, is add to total bill with tax. Okay, nice part is we don't have to calculate tax. Usually on these bills, it'll give us the sales tax. We do need to calculate our tip. So let's start by that. So for the following, It says for the bill on the left, so this one here, we're going to calculate a 15% tip, and for the bill on the right, we'll do a 20% tip. Okay, so our first step here is we want to take our percent, so 15% tip that we talked about, divide that by 100, we're going to get 0.15. The next step was take the subtotal, or the amount before tax. So that's this one here. Ignore this circle, okay? I don't care about that right now. So we're taking that subtotal, $21.15, and we're going to multiply that by 0.15. That will give you $3.17. That is the amount you are going to tip. Okay, the last step, we are going to take our actual total bill here, the amount with the tax included, and we're just going to add that total on, or that tip on, sorry. All right, so our total with tax, add the tip, and it should give you $26.01. Okay, so you should leave, I'm just going to round it to $26 since we don't have pennies anyway. Okay, you should leave $26 for your server. Okay, not the $22.84. Okay, let's go on to this next bill. This one's a little bit different. So right away we want to know that we're going to calculate a 20% tip. But if you notice here on our bill, this one's tricky. It already gave us a service charge of 10%. So sometimes restaurants will do that if you're in a very large group. They might automatically include a gratuity. So always double check to see if they've already tipped you a little bit, or made you tip a little bit, sorry. So this already gave us a 10% tip of $6. So 10% tip included. So we will tip another 10%. Okay, so we'll add another 10% on. So our first step, take that 10% and turn it into a decimal, 0.10, and then, excuse me, look at that subtotal here. Okay, don't look at the amount after tax or after the tip. Look at just that $60 subtotal. And let's find out what 10% of that is. Okay, times 0.10 for 10. And that will give you another $6 tip. Okay, I know we could have just cheated and looked at the bill because it already told us what the 10% tip was. Right, it's already $6, so we could just add another $6 on there. Okay, let's now go to, okay, our grand total here. So that's added in the tax. So we have our subtotal, we've added the tax on, we've added the tip on, and we're going to just add on our extra 10%. That extra 10% tip. Okay, so with that first 10%, then the second 10%, and the tax, your grand total should be $75.60. You should leave $75.60. Okay, so always remember that when you're going out to eat, always try to budget in what the tip is going to be, okay? Don't be that person that makes your server pay to serve you. I want you to continue on to this next sheet here, okay? We won't look too much about estimating tips. We can talk about that a little bit more when I'm back next week on how to estimate tips, okay? So you just put a little star beside that, and we'll talk about it more when I get back. But I do want you to try the rest of this on your own, okay? And I know that's a lot, but I think you will be able to rock it. If you need to go back to any of the videos, please make sure you're taking time to do that. And again, try to get all of this done before I get back. Take it home over the weekend if you need to. And I'll be there to answer any questions on Monday that you might have, okay? So great work this week. Keep it up to the very end so you can have a nice, relaxing weekend.